Hi, so today we're going to work on a Tomahawk TG2000i. It's just a 2000 watt inverter. You might have seen these, Honda makes one, Yamaha makes one, Tomahawk makes one. So we're just going to work on a standard like suitcase style inverter. Use them for your RV, use them on job sites, for construction, just basic backup power. These things are great because they're really quiet and they're also a stable use of power, so you can plug a lot of computers and sensitive electronics into it. It's not going to cause an issue. So they're quiet and they're really safe for electronics, so they're awesome. So this one just had some bad fuel in it, so we're gonna, it was left over the winter, so we're gonna just show you how to change out the carburetor, clean it, and then we'll also probably do a little maintenance on the air filter, maybe change the air filter or clean it, and then we'll put it back together and get it running. So here we go. So for this one, we're just gonna be taking apart the generator housing. A lot of these have a lot of like plastic and protection on them. It's all about soundproofing these kind of particular inverter generators. So compared to an open one, that's a little easier to work on. This one might be a little trickier, but it's not really harder. It's just about, you might have to disassemble more screws and just make sure you put them in a good place so you don't lose them. So we're just taking off screws, taking off the gas cap. We're gonna take apart this whole plastic housing. Once again, the purpose of this is to make it more soundproof and protect the generator, but it doesn't really have a function other than that. There's no mechanical parts on these plastic housing. It's just plastic and foam. So once you kind of like take apart all these, there's probably screws on, if it's a Honda or a Tomahawk, doesn't matter. On all parts of it, there's probably a little more than a dozen different screws that you're going to take off, and you'll be able to kind of separate all four pieces. It'll be like a front control panel, a back, left and right. So we're just taking off that left side panel, and that'll give us access to the air filter, which we are removing right now. A little screwdriver, take that air filter cover off. And if it's dirty, you can clean it, vacuum it, put a new one in. Just depends how dirty it is. This one's fine. It's not too heavy. There's a little oil on it, but other than that, it wasn't too bad. Then right above it, in kind of like silver, is the carburetor, which is what we'll be going after next. So before we get to the carburetor, we're actually going to remove the backing to the air filter cover. This will just give us like a better angle so you can see, and it'll also give us like a better view for the camera. And we're just going to loosen it up, because there's some pins in there that are holding it on. Everything in this kind of style of generator is really compact, just to save on space and weight, so it's kind of like slammed together as opposed to like the really big heavy ones you see for hurricane backup. Now I'm loosening up the other bolts on the other side of it. So this carburetor is really held in. There's a lot of pieces holding it together, so I'm kind of loosening everything so I can get it out. That tube is just the fuel line from gas tank to the carburetor. Alright, I think we got everything, almost. This is the throttle. So the throttle's on top of the carburetor. This one's a little more advanced, not your typical throttle, because it has electronics on it. It has like low oil sensor, it has overload, it has a choke. So there's a few more electronic like assemblies on top of it, but everything is kind of the same with the exception of that. So now that we've got that throttle off, there's a couple springs that are attached. We'll take those off, and then it'll start looking like a standard, carburetor that you've seen before. Alright, there we go. Comes out like other carburetors you've probably seen, but it's just held in by a lot of stuff, so you might have to move air filter assembly, some air intake line, fuel lines, some springs, the electronic part on the top, and then we're good. So this thing was dirty. Make sure to put fuel stabilizer in your gas powered products. Otherwise you have to go through this whole process and use the highest octane you can possibly get if you're going to use normal gas from a gas station. I prefer the stuff that's like you buy in the can. That stuff works really well because it, you know, it has a high octane and it doesn't like lose any octane. It has no ethanol too, which really gums up these carburetors. They're sensitive. So this is a bowl type carburetor. We're just going to remove that bottom screw and then you pull the bowl right out. And usually there's like dirt and sediment inside of this. And today, to clean it, I mean, we might not even see the debris, but it's in there because it's not working. We're just going to put it in a jewelry cleaner. This is like they call it an ultrasonic cleaner, but it's really used to clean jewelry. And you can buy this really cheap online for like 30 bucks. They work awesome. Like you can clean any kind of mechanical part besides jewelry, like stuff for cars, all types of stuff. I highly recommend it. You know, like spraying that little carb clean in the jets, it works sometimes, but you're like really pulling it apart. But you don't even have to break down the carburetor this much. You can just put the whole carburetor in the ultrasonic cleaner and it'll work. It's magic. So we kind of broke it down just to show if you're gonna like spray in the jets like we showed earlier, but you could just put the whole carburetor in there. Don't put the electronics, but you put the whole carburetor in there. And then here's some like ultrasonic cleaning fluid. I don't really know what it is, but just seems like soap to me. Also really cheap, like $3 online. Put it in there. You put it in there for 90 seconds. It kind of bubbles and gets all the oil and debris out of this thing. Comes out shiny and new, and then you just dry it off. All right, we're gonna take it out and dry it off. Alright, so now that the carburetor is clean, we are going to put it back on the machine. Same way it went out. Try to organize your screws before you take all this off so you know where to put it. If you have to write down steps, I'd do it too, or just watch the video, you can kind of see where it goes. We're just putting on the fuel line first. It makes it a little easier because it's a compact area. Press it all the way firm against it, so you don't want any air. You want to make sure the gaskets line up, and if a gasket rips, replace it or order a new one. We'll put that back on. A lot of times you don't have to take all this apart. You might be able to get the whole assembly as is. Alright, next we are going to make sure we have the electronic connection over the carburetor. And this one, it has the choke valve and the low oil and the automatic shut off and the eco mode and a bunch of other features that are kind of electronic. So we're just attaching that on top, and it's just going to be reading the carburetor level and engine speed. And then we're going to hook up the springs. Read it through. Tighten it down. Then I would just check to make sure that when you press the throttle lever or like the electronics moving it, that it moves the actual device on the carburetor. Now we're doing the air lines. Just make sure the generator gets enough air. And it's become tricky. That's all the EPA and CARB, California Air Emissions. That's what all these tubes are for. It's just to reduce air emissions. But so it seems like there's a lot going on there, but it's really simple. They're just trying to filter out air. So there's a couple more air intakes, and then it goes through the air filter and tries to reduce like the exhaust, but the concept's still the same. So now that we got all the throttle hooked up, fuel lines, air intake, putting the backing on the air filter cover, I'm just gonna start putting this thing back together. all the tubes hooked up. We can put the air filter cover on. This thing should be running great. It's going to be nice and smooth now. New air filter, so it's breathing a lot better, and then the gas is not dirty, so the combustion is going to be a lot better as well. We also checked all the spark plugs for this kind of process, so you kind of want to rule a couple things out. If you keep pulling and it's just not firing, you check the spark plug, but the spark plug was working great, and it wasn't flooded, so we were like, okay, it's got to be kind of a fuel system. So that's what we're doing. We're making sure that this thing can breathe with the air filter, and then we're checking the fuel system, which we put new fuel in. That's another tip. No ethanol if possible. All right, so then we're going to tighten up all the plastic pieces, put all the screws back in, make it look new again. Looking better now. And there you go. Put the gas cap on, and this thing's ready to go. So make sure you start it. I think that should do it for you guys. If you're experiencing kind of issues with carburetor and air filter, clean them. That's how you do it on a suitcase style generator inverter. Make sure to follow us on our YouTube channel. Thank you.